Good morning, community. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. Welcome to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, C Suite Trusted Advisor and Board Director, helping other members of the C Suite and their teams reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. Today, my guest, and I'm so excited to have her, is Ms. Pat Wadors with UKG. She is the CHRO. And we are going to be talking about lots of different things, but in particular, we're going to be talking about balancing culture and belonging. Pat, thank you so much for joining me. How you doing today?
I'm awesome. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. We are actually picking up on an earlier conversation that you and I had, which was just delightful, just getting to know each other. And the first question that I have for you is to tell us about UKG and the phenomenal culture that you've created there.
UKG is phenomenal. I won't say I created the culture. It was one of the reasons why I joined. Hopefully, I'm adding to the culture in a nice way. So UKG is a merger of two amazing companies. It was Kronos and Ultimate Software. And the culture is just extremely human and kind, very caring. And so their new name was UKG, but they use the values as the underpinning, which is united, kind, and growing. Right. That's how I think about UKG. And they're in the talent space. They're software as a service, human capital software. And so I get to geek out on all things about how you take care of your employees. Right. So from greeting them and welcoming them into your company to growing them, giving them feedback, paying them, their work schedules, like payroll, like you name it. It's pretty amazing to be in this space of people and living it every day, both as a product and as the chief of people at UKG. I'm blessed.
You are. Let me ask you though, is it kind of hard to live up to the name unity, kindness, and growth? That is like, you're just putting it out there. What is that like every day?
It's a compass, right? So if you think about your values, if you think about what you stand for as a human, right, this is the framework in which you base all your decision making upon. Like this, am I walking my values? Am I living them to my fullest? So if I think about United, right, when I make a decision relating to our employees, I want to co-create my solutions. I want to get feedback from the employees. I want to work with the leader. So it's leader led, not HR pushed, right? I want that co-creation means I'm aligned with them. I am united with them in the service of them. So it won't feel that it's done to them, but with them. So that's number one. And then the kind is like, gosh, who doesn't want to be kind? Let's be kind. And who doesn't want to be part of a growing organization? And like, what does it mean to grow up to be your best self? So I think all of this is just a compass of greatness.
You mentioned human, and I think about human affirming behaviors. That's something that my mentor, Dr. Bernard Curtis, always talked about, was human affirming behaviors. And then you also said not something that's being done to, but with. And when we talk in general about diversity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives and efforts, when people feel like something's being done to them, anything, but especially this, they won't get on board. But when people feel like they're part of initiating some change that's going to benefit everyone, that's when people get excited. Have you found that in your approach to this work?
Oh my goodness, yes. I think being a parent has taught me a lot too. So when my kids were younger, gosh, I had two boys that were 14 months apart, and I have a daughter that's 2 years younger than them. But getting the boys to dress up for dinners and going out and stuff was like just a mess. And so what I learned through some great counselors is like, look, choice is really important for every stage of life for a human being, choice. And so what I would do is like, you got the choice, you choose what you want to wear tonight. I put your choices on your bed. And so they'd go to their bedroom and they'd be like 3 different shirts, stripes, plaid, you name it, but they all had collars. Mm-hmm. We all were clean. Mm-hmm. You had a choice. And they'd walk out of that bedroom not angry. Yeah. Right. So I gave them guardrails is essentially what I learned how to do. And I think, aligning with them, that dinner means you dress up a little bit, especially if you're seeing people. That's a guardrail. Now I'll give you choices in how you want to show up to that event. I try to do the same thing at work, right? I think that we should align on what are our guiding principles, right? What do we believe in? What's our compass? What is bad and what is good? Like, what are we striving to be? And then within that framework, we have freedom. And so if I co-create with you, your ownership is higher. Like if I told you your ownership would be here, if
Mm-hmm.
you help me problem solve, it's like we're in it together. Like that's where I want to be.
Couple of things come to mind. When I was little, my mom would do that for me. She'd lay out choices, and I could either dress monochromatically or I could dress with colors that were complementary. And I always picked, obviously, the monochromatic look because that's just who I am. But I love how you use that example. And then going back to the fact that the guardrails in behavior. I was working with a client early on in our process, and they would often say, "Well, we believe people will do the right thing," but even that is subject to, well, am I doing the right thing for other people like me, or am I doing the right thing for everybody? So I love how you said you've got guardrails, but within those guardrails, we give you choices to decide how you want to show up.
Mm-hmm.
How do people react to that? Do they usually get on board? Do they even realize what's going on?
Let's say a third, a third, a third.
Yeah.
What's going on, and they're just
Yeah.
like they're going along, which is fine, right? They're working within the framework and doing what they're supposed to do. A third get it, and like they're really empowered by the freedom, right? Then some of those folks are pushing my boundaries a little bit. Like, what about this principle? What about that? They make me stronger because they're now rumbling with me in the creation of it, which is great. And there's a third that resist it because they did not create all those guardrails, right? And they're not. And usually and I'm not saying this in a pejorative way, but usually it's through ignorance, right? They haven't been through here before. And so therefore they don't know the if then statements. If I don't do this, then this could occur. Or if I do this, this opportunity can be achieved. And so it's more education on that third segment. There's more time invested in that third segment than the first two for sure. And some are just scared of the framework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we talk about resistors in the approach that I used, we identify hesitators and obstructors. And it's not necessarily that they're being destructive in what it is that they're trying to do. To your point, they're resisting because I'm not sure this is going to work. And those that kind of identify as obstructors, they're so used to what they know works that they just don't want to try anything else. So how do you even create the appetite for people to try? There's the ADKAR model that talks about raising awareness, creating desire, the knowledge, the skills, and the reinforcement. How do you get them to even want to try if it's that other third?
I love that you speak in those models. I kind of go through intuition a lot and tried and true experience and experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
I've got more to learn. So here's what I do. Data shows me and life has shown me that patterns de-risk us.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They don't accelerate or improve our opportunity for success. They de-risk to some degree failure.
Mm-hmm.
And that assumes, your hypothesis assumes that the landscape, all the elements are same that what you've witnessed before, a decade ago, 20 years ago, whatever that thing is. We all know life has changed. And so what I do is that, leaders have some ego, right? We have ego. We want to be great. I've never met a leader that wanted to fail. That's why pattern recognition is something that they lean on so heavily. I have to give them courage to break their pattern. I have to show them if you want to be great, you shouldn't lean on your past. You should lean forward and say, what can I take from the past I can change, modify to go greater? And so when you think about pattern of hiring, I've always hired from these schools or from this background. That's because it's de-risked the failure of that candidate, but doesn't mean they're going to be phenomenal. Doesn't mean they're going to add to that culture that I talked about earlier. So it's giving them the why. Like people will change either because they're afraid of failure or the opportunity is so great they'd kind of be silly not to grab it. I try to show them the opportunity is so great, and we can experiment in steps so they get more comfortable of breaking their patterns. So I walk alongside them. I try to do that with them.
So you mentioned three things that come to mind. Models, and the experiential learning model is one that I love. You just kind of get people doing something and reflecting on it and see what they've learned from it. So it goes back to what you said about, we think things are the same from 10 years ago and they're not. Society has changed. The way people show up has changed. The way we even talk about things. In this work, I'm always having to decide, do I feel like educating somebody or do I have to consider the source? And what I mean by consider the source is just last week I was walking around my neighborhood and I had met an older white gentleman and he's coming out of his neighborhood and I'm going into mine, and we get where we're going and then we meet again as I'm coming back into my neighborhood and he's going back into his. And he, the sun was out and he's talking about, oh, your tan is so much better than mine. And I'm thinking, You know, because I understand that we've got a generational thing here, and because I understand you're just trying to connect, I'm
Yeah.
not even going to bother. I'm just going to say thank you and share a smile and go back home, right? So we have to think about what was acceptable, how many decades ago, it just isn't today. And because people are educated and they know some things differently. And then you talked about, you know, as far as leaders wanting to be the best, what got you here won't get you there. There's actually a book people call "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." Forgive me, I think the author is Daniel Goldsmith, but if I'm wrong, you can still look it up. What got you here won't get you there, and it's very true. The we get into challenges not necessarily transitioning from this level to this level. If we can do it here, we can do it here. It's just different skill sets. It's the transition from here to here that is problematic sometimes if we don't surround ourselves with mentors and coaches who understand where we're going and what the process might look like, especially if it's new to us. But then when you talk about the brain, and if it's something different, we kind of see it as a threat. The brain is pretty much set up to protect us, which
Of
is why
course.
we need to get out of relying on the fast brain back here, which is the amygdala, and let the prefrontal cortex take over. That says, well, wait, let me stop, because just because this is someone who looks like an individual who I did not have the best experience with, it's a different individual, so I need to give that an opportunity. So, what is the difference in folks recognizing that, and how soon does it take in your experience, or how long does it take?
Oh, it's by individual.
Mhm.
It's so varied. I mean, what I say at work is like slow your neurological roll.
Yeah.
If you pause even for a few seconds,
Mhm.
your decisions and outcomes will be better, even without me prescribing what that outcome needs to be. I will just say, hey, look, we're going through a review cycle. We're going through a promotional cycle. Slow your neurological roll, folks, and let me know how y'all are doing. I want to know if you're checking your bias. Do you have a
Mhm.
favorite? Do you like everyone that's Irish? Do you like, left-handers? Whatever that thing is, right? So I made it so humorous and so obvious. They're like, okay, I see where she's going. I don't feel threatened, right? I might have a bias, and so they're going to slow their neurological roll and just kind of check themselves. And every time I've done that and made them pause, I see better outcomes from them.
Mhm.
And then I reinforce those better outcomes. Look, oh my goodness, look what y'all did. Like, this is
Mhm.
awesome. Right. And then if I think there's something a little wonky, I'm like, help me understand. I always ask a question. Just help me understand.
Mhm.
Help
I
me
love
understand.
that. I love that slow your neurological roll. That I love the way that rolls off the tongue, actually. And then help me understand. So when I was focused more on leadership, I would say, we say that the three most powerful words in the English language are "I love you," but I think in the workplace, the three most powerful words are "help me understand," because the help gets rid of the ego. It says, "I can't figure this out without you."
Yep.
Me is saying, "I'm owning my situation here," and understand is acknowledging you've got information that I can benefit from. And you just kind of bring people into partnership with you with those three little words: "Help me understand."
Yeah. And I teach my leaders that your best tool in your career is a question,
Yes.
and a question with the intent to learn, not to show how smart you are.
Mhm.
If you're setting people up with a question, you have failed.
Yeah.
But if you ask a question to get smarter, to get bolder, to get
Mhm.
more creative, you're going to unlock higher creativity, higher engagement, higher buy in. Like, all that goodness comes out through a
Mhm.
question. Statements rarely create that opportunity.
That's right.
And if I can ask 5 questions in a meeting that changes the trajectory of that meeting, that outcome, that's a
Mhm.
great day. I didn't even have those answers. Like, I'm not the one who created it, but
Yep.
the question is the catalyst.
I love that, because if you're listening deeply, you don't have to necessarily come in with a list of questions. Although, by the way, I do have my second official question that I want to ask you, because the conversation has been so good. It's always led to the next natural question. We're having a real conversation from the C suite with Miss Pat Wadors, the CHRO at UKG. Please come back and join me. In the meantime, if you want to hear this one again, you know where to go, drnita.com, and look for the link in the top center of the homepage, Keeping It Real podcast. And in the meantime, please subscribe, like, share, And if anything from this conversation or any of my other conversations helps you to reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different, please share with your network. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.